I would like to say welcome to everyone in the audience to this fireside session about ADHD and entrepreneurship. And my name is Josefin Svensson, and I'm running Sweden's biggest podcast about ADHD. And in this podcast, I'm interviewing individuals with ADHD as well as doctors, experts, to understand how ADHD affect people who live with this every day, and also interviewing people in different industries with this diagnosis. And when I started my podcast, it was after I got diagnosed when I was 23, and I started to Google a lot about what is ADHD and how is it to live with this diagnosis. And I tried to find stories from other people about how they are affected about it. And what I found was a lot of articles about entrepreneurs with ADHD, which was very interesting for me. And I wanted to know more about the link between entrepreneurship and ADHD, as I've been an entrepreneur myself since the early 20s. So that's what we're going to talk about in this session. And with me here, I have Will Schroter. Did I pronounce your name right?
You did. You did.
Okay, great. And you are the CEO and founder of startups.com. And I was so amazed when I heard that your first company that you started when you were 19 grew without funding from $37 to $65 million. Is that true, or?
Oh yeah, no, we got bigger. We got it to $600 million.
Oh my God. Okay, I was wrong with the numbers there.
No. We got to 65 too. You got to get there first.
Oh my God. Yeah, but I mean, when I read about your story, I felt like I could talk for 1 hour about just your story. But what I think is more important to highlight with you and to mention about you is that you are now using all your experience and knowledge about entrepreneurship and spreading awareness about this through your podcast, Startup Therapy.
Mhm.
And where you are discussing topics that can be tough or challenging for founders and leaders or everyone in a startup. So I really recommend that to all of our listeners here in the audience to listen to that.
Thank you.
To kick this off, how's your mood today?
It's fantastic. I wake up every day happy. Every day ready to go.
Every day.
Every night's a different story. By the
that's
end of the
true.
day, I feel a bit different. But every day is a good start.
I felt so bad when you told me that you are a morning person.
Oh yeah. I pretty much can't sleep past 5:30 in the morning. No matter how hard I try. Doesn't matter what time I go to bed. I'm awake at 5:30 in the morning. Is not wonderful.
That's so crazy. I'm
Yeah.
like literally the opposite. I
Yeah.
have a really hard time to wake up.
Yeah, I wish that was my problem right now.
But we are here to talk about ADHD and entrepreneurship. But before we start, why do you think that this is an important topic?
Well, as someone who's wrestled with ADHD my entire life, mostly undiagnosed, I think there are two challenges that I ran into, and I think it's worth us chatting about. One challenge was that it didn't occur to me that there was any diagnosis. I kind of grew up in an era where ADHD was kind of a new thing as far as, a level diagnosis. And then the second thing is other founders weren't talking about it, not the way they are now. And I think the fact that the conversation around mental health has started to become a real and genuine and vulnerable conversation in all the right ways is incredibly powerful. Nothing's worse than having these feelings or running into these challenges and feeling like you're the only one dealing with them. It's a terrible place to be. And so, like you, I enjoy talking about the topic and kind of, where my challenges have been historically.
And before we jump into, I have so many questions for you. A typical ADHD symptom, by the way. But before we jump into that questions, I would just like to give a brief definition of ADHD for our audience. in case you don't know what it is. So ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I think that most of us may think of ADHD related to just hyperactivity, like me standing on the floor and just being crazy. But the symptoms of ADHD can really vary a lot. However, people diagnosed with ADHD or ADD without the H for hyperactivity do often have problems with regulation of either energy, focus, impulsivity, attention, and or emotions. So it can vary a lot. And what I think is important to understand is that ADHD is not just something that you grow out of. Like you said, for 20 years ago, we didn't know that adults can still have ADHD symptoms. So you're born with it, and it affects you even when you're an adult if you don't have the right coping strategies to handle your symptoms. And an estimated number of adults with ADHD is 3 to 5%. So that is a short explanation of ADHD, but you were into that topic, but how would you describe your ADHD for the audience?
For me, it's a couple of things. I think the three areas that it became the most obvious. And again, I didn't know for a long time that this was even a thing. One was my anxiety. I would get, like most entrepreneurs, totally fired up about an issue at 3 a.m. for no good reason. And I would assume that I'd need to jump out of bed at that moment and fix whatever that problem was, as if that was the most important problem in the world, and every time it wasn't. So I had this bizarre, uncontrollable anxiety that I just thought was part of my personality. The other thing was, a lot of people don't tie this, was forgetfulness, like a kind of memory issues. Mine were epic. In fact, that's actually what tripped me the first time to really even think to look into a diagnosis. I was at this awards ceremony for the Entrepreneur of the Year, and I'd been nominated with a handful of other people at the awards ceremony. I sit down at my table, and there's some random guy sitting next to me, and I start making chat with him, because he's sitting next to me. And I start talking to him. I said, introduce myself, etc. He's looking at me really weird. And as I'm talking, he looks at me and goes, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I'm thinking, like, how would I know who you are? He's like, "I'm the one that nominated you for this award. Like, we sat 2 weeks ago for 2 hours, like, talking through this. I mean, here's the guy that brought me to the ceremony, and I had no idea who he was," right? That's when I knew there was a problem. I mean, it happened to me my whole life, but like, again, that was just so embarrassing. But and then the last piece was just, of course, focus, which everybody's most familiar with. But I think all of those things were affecting me. It didn't occur to me at the time, this is 20 years ago, that any of these things were going to be something I had to get a diagnosis for. And when I went in, talked to a handful of doctors, did a couple days of testing, they're like, "You've got the craziest ADD there is." And I didn't even know it was a thing. And so since then, I've been working through it, and trying to find my own dealing mechanisms.
Yeah. If you try to think about how this has been like affecting or influencing your entrepreneurship or your businesses, can you see that this is really clear symptomatic for my ADHD, that I have been acting this way, or that something has been extra challenging, or
well, it comes up in so many different ways as far as the challenges. I'll give you an example, going back to the anxiety. Imagine for a minute that you're on a boat with 10 other people, and in your mind, the boat's about to sink. And you're going crazy about the fact that the boat's about to sink, but everyone else is looking at you going, the boat's just fine. That's an entrepreneur in a startup company, right? In your mind, especially if you have this ADHD or this anxiety, everything's about to explode. The whole boat's about to sink. But everyone else is looking at you saying, what are you so freaked out about? Because you're not on the same page. You're not even remotely close to the same page. Think of how intense it gets for all the other people on the boat to have to deal with somebody, in their case, their boss, who's constantly freaking out about the boat always going down and nobody else can see it. I think, it took me years and years and years to understand why I was the only person freaking out. I just assumed because I was the founder and it meant more to me. That's not true. I was the only person freaking out because I was the only person processing what were essentially trivial problems as, end of life problems. And it wasn't until I got a handle on that, until I realized, wow, these actually aren't all critical problems. And by the way, holy cow, that was a lot of extra weight that I put on the rest of the team for no reason. And so let's just say my teams are much happier than they used to be in working with me.
But as you're explaining here about anxiety, that's one of the symptoms of ADHD, or it could be related to ADHD when you're not diagnosed and know how to handling your emotions, for example. But on the other side, has it been what's your beneficial characteristics that you can relate to ADHD?
There's been a few. And when I was diagnosed, the doctor said, we can put you on these medications. And I said, to be honest, I don't want to get rid of it. I said, there's a lot to it that I actually want to be able to harness, not necessarily medicate. And I'm not knocking medication. And just in my case, I was really trying to find a way to leverage this versus try to kind of shut it down. And so one of the things that I liked is I liked the hyperactivity. So what I started to do, I started to build workflows that kind of helped harness my hyperactivity. In other words, I made sure that I didn't try to do one thing that would last a very long time. I think one of the things we say is, I've got hyperactivity and my mind is all over the place, so I'm going to shut down every browser tab and I'm going to make sure I stay totally focused, right? And it just doesn't work, right? Your mind goes somewhere else for some other reason. I've tried it a million times. Yeah. And so instead, what I've done is I've said, look, I can't concentrate on anything for more than 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to create all of my tasks around things I can get done in 5 to 10 minutes. Now, that requires a different workflow. It requires a different task list. It requires a different way that you communicate with people. But it turns out, and I'm sure for some of the folks listening, I have an ability to work massively in parallel across a whole bunch of things pretty much at the same time. Very few people can do that. I can switch gears instantly. I'm the founder and CEO of a company of 200 people. I can jump from the marketing team to the product team to the engineering team instantly, all at the same time, all in the same Slack chat. And in my mind, there is no ramp up period. My mind just instantly goes 0 to 100 on that next topic. Now, if you were to say, cool, now put Will in a meeting for 1 hour on one topic with all of these people, total disaster, right? Yeah. Because you'll get 5 to 10 minutes of my attention. And then at the end of that 5 to 10 minutes, I'm already thinking about what we should be doing differently in customer service. And they're like, this is a marketing. what are you talking about right now? Yeah. Exactly. So let's say this. Being remote has helped dramatically. Being on Slack has helped dramatically. Because in Slack, I can have 10 conversations at exactly the same time. And it takes my hyperactivity and my ADHD and makes it a superpower.
Exactly. And you can sort everything in different channels. I love that. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. And
I just make a channel for it and then I sort my brain from all the disaster of crazy ideas.
Well, that's the first thing I do in the morning. Is I basically do what I call clearing hard drive space. Okay. The first thing I do in the morning is I open up a blank page on my browser, and I just start typing as fast as I can. I get all the thoughts out of my head. They don't have to be in order. They don't have to be coherent. They just have to be every single passing thought until I'm actually run out of passing thoughts. And then I look back at everything I wrote, and then I just copy and paste all the stuff that's meaningful over to a to-do list. The reason I found out that this was so powerful for me, and it was life-changing, was that often when our minds are racing, we're working so hard to try to chase down all of those things. Instead, what I found was just getting them out of my head and on paper made me stop thinking about them so that I could actually focus on getting stuff done. So all these little, tools and tricks that I've used over the years have actually turned my ADHD into a superpower, whereas before it was holding me back.
That's really, really interesting. I also read a book about this called The Artist Way. where you are every morning you should do your morning paper, where you just exactly as you say, just write down everything that you have in your mind, and if there's nothing, you just write I have nothing in my mind or
Yep.
anything. And I actually started with that as well, but I was so focused on that the book said 3 pages. So after a couple of days, I just quit because it was too much. So, but now I went back to it, and I'm just doing everything from a half page to 1 page because it's more important that I do it so than that I skip it. But it's a really, really interesting thing that you're doing, a routine.
And look, like many probably, you know, listening to this, I've just tracked down every life hack I could find, because for me, I didn't want to dull what I felt were some pretty powerful things, you know, in my personality. The one thing I will make an exception on is anxiety. That was the one thing I couldn't find a single benefit where the anxiety was brutal. I found myself constantly, day in and day out. And mind you, I've been a founder for almost 30 years. So like this isn't my first rodeo. I've been doing this across 9 companies. And I found that no matter where my business was, no matter how well things went, I was constantly in a state of everything's, you know, the world is ending. And at some point too, that starts to have serious health effects and everything else like that. So while I found lots of coping mechanisms to channel and harness my ADHD, the anxiety was not one of them. The anxiety was something I had to tackle head on.
We were also going to discuss about whether ADHD is a superpower or not, and we just have some 3 minutes left before we go through the Q&A. And as I said before, when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I Googled a lot and found these super entrepreneurs like you with ADHD. And the only thing I felt was just anxiety, as we have been talking about, and that my superpower was very, very far away. And this can happen to me a lot. I mean, one day I can feel like I'm the queen of the world for real, and the other day I feel like, why do my boyfriend want to live with me? So, but I guess that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that may not understood this crazy logic about your ADHD symptoms. And do you have any like tips or coping strategies on how to channelize and turn your destructive behavior or energy to something that is more productive for yourself? You mentioned this notes that you are doing every morning, but do you have any other strategies to handling this?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that people don't think about, especially as founders, is it really helps to have a circle of other founders that you share your challenges with. Okay, so years and years ago, I decided to put together these founder groups, and these were groups of like 5 to 10 of my peers, where all we would do was just get together and just talk about how things were going, you know, kind of like a support group for other founders. Here's what happened every single time. And to fast forward, I've done this across thousands of founders at this point. We all have the same problems. We all feel amazing one day and horrible the next day. We all feel like everyone else has it figured out but me. And what am I doing wrong? It's kind of like when you go through your social media feed. Everybody else is going on the best vacation ever. Well, not anymore, but except me, right? Yeah. And the truth is, we're all stressed out. We're all an emotional wreck. But until you hear other people say that they're feeling the same way, especially when you hear them from businesses you thought were amazing, you don't really have a way to calibrate your own emotions. This is a very, very lonely journey, the founder journey. And the worst thing you can do is keep it lonely. The best thing you can do, the best thing to cope and calibrate, which is what this is all about, is find other founders and be open and transparent with those founders about what you're going through and what they're going through. And it just gives you this amazing ability to say, oh, okay, it's not just me, which goes for miles.
Great. And I think we need to jump into all the questions that we have. And I
Sure.
saw that it was one question about sleeping problems. And you told her in the chat that you have some sleeping techniques. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I do. So like probably most of you listening, my mind is racing at the end of the night. I found nothing that I could do, even like with sleeping pills and everything else like that, to really make a huge difference. So a few of the techniques that I use, and to put this in perspective, I'm asleep within 15 minutes of my head hitting the pillow, right? So this is incredibly effective for me. One of the things, and this may not matter to you, I think it's just the exercise. I list every single thing that I'm grateful for when my head hits the pillow. It's the equivalent of counting sheep, but I also think it helps you practice gratitude. And it's everything from how comfortable my pillow is to like, how my daughter's smile was today. But I also find it helps with a little bit of anxiety because it helps me reflect in incredible detail that life's okay. Even when there's a huge problem at work, I think it really helps calm my mind because it kind of takes my anxiety down a notch. The other thing that I do is I try so hard to kind of just, meditate in my sleep and try to just clear my head. Every time I get passing thoughts, I keep clearing them. And that's how I fall asleep every single time within 15 minutes. It didn't used to be that way. I used to stay up for hours.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And I will also like to add yoga. I talked about that
yeah, of
before
course.
with you, Will. It's amazing for your mind and body to handle ADHD symptoms. Another question, and thank you, Jennifer, for your question there. And another question we have from Therese: what are your 3 most important daily habits that allows you to thrive?
Sure. The one that I mentioned, kind of writing everything down and getting thoughts out of my head. The other one that I think really I like you guys to really think about. My task list has exactly one thing on it every day. I think one of the things that really threw me off, and maybe this is a symptom of ADHD, but I think this applies to everyone. I have 20 things that I need to get done, but every day only one thing gets promoted to the top. Here's the idea. If I can get one thing done every day, but actually get it done, I'm making progress. What ends up happening instead is I put 20 things on there. My focus and progress gets fractionalized across all of these different things, and then nothing actually gets done. Or even worse, 3 things get done, but I go home thinking, well, the rest of those things weren't done, so I feel like a failure. Once I got in the habit of just getting one thing done, I got 100 times more things done. And by the way, when the one thing gets done, I don't just like close my computer down and go home, right? I just to add the next thing on the list. But you'd be surprised at how rarely and how hard it is to just get one thing done. We actually took that same mentality and spread it across the whole organization. Like I said, we've got about 200 people. And we focus all of our time and all of our planning on what gets done by Friday. We make no plans for the entire organization beyond Friday. And again, when you focus the entire organization about getting everything done by Friday, lo and behold, things actually get done. I mean, the list goes on, but there are a million ways to really start to harness this, but it takes real work.
A great strategy for procrastination, because it's also a big problem for people with ADHD. Can it be a really small thing, or does it need to be the most important thing? Or
no, it just has to be something of merit, right? It could be record the podcast today. When I record a podcast like our Startup Therapy podcast, I have 28 other things to do. But so long as I get that done, that's all that matters. It doesn't mean, again, that I have nothing else to do. It just means no matter what, that has to get done. And again, I think people get all excited about having huge task lists and look at all the stuff that I have to do. I look at it as look at all the distractions that aren't going to get anything done at all. And so focus is everything. And I don't think it's just the founder. I think it's the entire team.
We go to the next question here about your short-time memory issues that you mentioned before. Do you have any comments on how to handle this?
It's so bad. Again, for the folks that are listening, my memory is epically bad. and has only gotten worse over time with age and some other things that I've gone through. I actually don't have a great, hey, here's how everything fixed for me. And if somebody else has something that's improved their memory, I am all for listening to it. I will say,
Me too.
on the anxiety front, I do have some techniques there that I think have been life-changing that I've recommended to hundreds of founders, and I found it pretty successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and we also had a question about that. So
Yeah.
please share.
So years back, for no good reason, I was reading this book by Ray Kurzweil, the theorist at MIT, and Ray wants to live forever. And he was going through his entire supplement routine of like 250 supplements that he takes every day to live forever. And I'm reading about this because I thought it was fascinating. But one of the things he mentions in the book was that 2 supplements he takes. One is called 5-HTP, the number 5-HTP, which helps balance serotonin. And the other is DHEA. And the combination of those two are kind of natural over-the-counter supplement ways to basically manage your anxiety. Now, I thought it was silly, but I took it anyway. I was like, okay, let's see what happens. A few days in, nothing happens. I just kind of put it in my regular supplement routine and kind of forgot about it. But then this crazy thing happened, and this is like 5 years ago. About a month in, all of a sudden, I just sort of noticed that all the things that would normally kind of freak me out and kind of set my anxiety in motion just weren't bothering me anymore. And I've been on it for 5 years, and I've got to say, it's been the single biggest change I've ever had in my life. I've had no side effects to it. And again, your mileage may vary. I'm not recommending it. You investigate it yourself. But I can tell you firsthand, and then from lots of the founders who have also gotten on that train, it's been life-changing. My anxiety has gone from a daily at a 10 to maybe a 1 from that point on.
So the supplements that you're talking about, I wrote it in the chat. Was it the right spelling there? Can you please check?
Oh yeah, sorry, I got it. It was 5-HTP. I put it in there, and then DHEA.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. But it's supplements, so no it's not medication.
Right. Yeah. They're over the counter. They're just supplements.
Yeah. So interesting. I need to Google about this during the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't recommend it enough. Again, your mileage may vary. Speak to your doctor. All the disclaimers. Maybe it won't work for you, but it was life-changing for me.
Oh my God, that's so interesting. We had so many questions here. I love it. And we'll see here. Rafael had a question here. Why do you think that it's important to get this diagnosis if you relate to yourself and your story? And what would you say to someone who just got diagnosed with ADHD and feel totally newbie to this?
I mean, it's like anything else. Like, I mean, think of all the things that I was so stressed out about dealing with. Like, I couldn't remember things, but I didn't know why. I was anxious all the time, but I didn't know why. And I grew up with this, so it's not like I had a before and after. It's like ADHD just happened. I grew up like in school. I couldn't pay attention to what the teacher was saying for more than a few minutes, which made me a horrible student. I can't read anything for more than a few minutes before my mind wanders. I can't make it through a paragraph. I was giving a lecture years back at a university here in the States, and one of the students in the class stood up and asked me a question. She said something, she read a passage from a book, and she said, what do you think about that? And I was like, wow, that's actually really insightful. Where'd you read it from? And she's like, it's from your book. Like, I didn't even know. Right? I had no idea. On the plus side, I complimented it. That would have been really embarrassing had I not. But for an example, like with Startup Therapy on our podcast, I actually listened to the episodes because I can't remember anything that was said in the episodes. So for me, I'm listening to them for the first time. My memory is so bad, it's not even funny.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I'm watching movies 20 times. I said to my boyfriend yesterday, please, can we see No Country for Old Men? And he was like, but we saw that last weekend. Yeah, but I want to see it again. And he's like, but we saw it 5 times. No, I want to watch it again.
It's just new for us.
Yeah, but you can read a book how many times you like, and
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Really interesting question here from Antti about what you told us about your how your ADHD also affected your employees around you.
Mhm.
So, what do you have any like? What can you learn about your leadership skills now, and what would you recommend to other leaders and managers with ADHD?
I was fortunate in this recent company, startups.com, because I work with my closest friends, which it's really fortunate that works out. Often it doesn't. And I think that was game changing for me, because this time around, my friends were comfortable enough with me to kind of raise their hand and say, "Hey, Will, like you probably should have approached this differently. You kind of went out a little bit out of bounds on this." And I'm very introspective, and I tend to look at those things and say, when I look at any problem, my first question is, what did I do wrong? And so I was willing to kind of invest in that discussion. But to the point of folks asking, I really think where it will work for you, kind of how you can develop your team, is being able to say, hey, what could I have done differently? You got to dust up or whatever. Keep asking the questions of, hey, this person, I gave them the direction, it didn't work, it broke. What could I have done differently? The assumption is always that I did everything right and they were broken. But I think with people who have a lot of anxiety, have ADD, etc., we tend to overlook that our behavioral patterns are leading to some of these outcomes. Our communication is leading to some of these outcomes. It's not just all them. And so what I started to do is I started to question everything. And it was actually pretty helpful, because I realized that a lot of the things that I was doing, a lot of my management techniques were actually working against me. And so I was very fortunate to get that feedback.
Thank you so much, Will, for having you in this session. It's been
Of course.
I could talk about this forever, I guess. It's like when I'm so interested in discussions about ADHD, so that's not something that I just, I have my attention span really focused. But it's the same for you. Last question: when you're really interested in something, can you keep your attention to it?
No, I don't even try. Honestly, I've got 5 minutes tops on cogent attention, which is tricky because I do a tremendous amount of writing, and I've just learned that, for example, if I'm going to write an article, today all I'm going to do is put bullet points down. There's no way I'm going to be able to write 4 sentences in a row. So I'll just get all of the bullet points I can out of my head, and tomorrow I'll come back and try to fill out one of those bullet points. It's not ideal. I wish I could just sit down and write. And I've written thousands and thousands and thousands of pages in my life. And all of them required a much different approach. There's no version where I'm going to sit through and focus on anything.
Great strategies that you have shared to us. And thank you so much for all the great questions. I hope I haven't missed anything. Or do you want to add something?
Oh, I was just going to say, I put my Twitter on there. If you guys have any questions, just ask them in public on Twitter, or here, I'll give you my personal email. There it is. Or hit me up with an email. I love talking about this stuff. Startups.com is my dream job. I just get to sit around and talk to founders all day about stuff that they're dealing with. So it's not a hassle to me. I absolutely love it.